Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserlo.
Welcome back into the Four Tire Change podcast. Dawson Iserlo with you here at ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Another week in the NASCAR Cup Series, and this time a pretty popular result based on the driver who won it. We'll get into that and so much more. Going to be a bit of a quick episode this week just because there's some big stuff coming. Talladega's next weekend. We're going to do a lot more stuff on Talladega. Likely have a guest on, as we do for some of the bigger races. And, we weren't expecting Texas to be much. It was a little better than we thought it would be. So, all that is good. So let's get right into it here. Entering the week, it was interesting coming off the two short tracks that obviously didn't go so well with Richmond and Martinsville. Just the short track package still kind of being something that we're trying to work on here. Getting back to 1.5 miles in Texas Motor Speedway. The good news, we know the next-gen car delivers at 1.5 miles. The bad news, Texas has been the worst track on the circuit in a lot of people's opinions for a long time now. And I think there was that fear. Look, we've had some real debacles over there. The tire wear disaster race where everybody was blowing tires. You've had, some just sloppy races. And again, the racing just hasn't been great. Just tough to get really good competitive races at that track. And, there's been a lot of questions about the future of it. They lost their second date recently. And, that ended up, I think, making some people pretty happy that we don't have to go there twice. But still have a race. And they also moved it out of the playoffs, which I think made a lot of people really happy. So, going in, the storylines were pretty simple. What is the racetrack going to look like? How's the racing going to be? They've done some work to it, and we know that there's the potential of them doing more work to it down the line. And so is this going to be a situation where it's pretty clear afterwards that you might as well tear this thing up and start over? Or do we have hope? I think we're more on the hope side, but let's talk about how we got there. But first, I want to go back to the Xfinity race because that was on Saturday. One of the best Xfinity races of the year. There's also times it's for whatever reason. Now look, part of the reason is completely different cars. You're not running the next-gen car in Xfinity. But sometimes when races are awful in the Cup level, you get great Xfinity races, those same tracks and weeks. And I don't know what really is for that. Now this time it wasn't fully that, but Ryan Sieg, look, he's a guy I just root for. In case you don't know his story, it's a family-run team, Ryan Sieg Racing. They've been at it for, better than a decade now. Sieg's never won a race. He's been so close so many times. He's turned himself into a perennial playoff contender in the Xfinity Series. I think he missed out last year, but he was in the playoffs the year before that. Always runs top 10, top 15 in the mix there, and occasionally puts himself, in position to have a chance to win the race. And this was one of those weeks, and man, there was a restart towards the end with about 15, 20 laps to go where he just skyrocketed to the front. And it was awesome, and the announcers were doing, I think, a good job of explaining, that this would be a massive deal for him. Eventually, on the last run, he has a big lead, but he gets run down by Sam Mayer. Justin Allgaier, who was in third, had dominated the first two stages of this race. He had short run speed, though, and he got caught in a couple of pit stop track position things. So he's in third, trying to run down Mayer, who's trying to run down Sieg. Mayer runs him down. We get one of the closest finishes in the history of NASCAR. What was it, 0.003 of a second or 0.002 of a second? And ultimately, Sam Mayer beats out Ryan Sieg. So really tough break for Sieg. You're happy to see Sam Mayer get back there. Junior Motorsports looking like they're going to maybe turn some things around here after a bit of a slow start to the season. But just an incredible stage setter, right, for the Sunday Cup race. And then the Cup race, look, it was a busy sports weekend. The Masters going on. So, as far as the ratings and stuff, I don't know if it's going to be great for them because they were competing right against Scotty Scheffler, taking home his second green jacket. But, look, some things that happened in this race that were exciting, right? There was a lot of different strategy. The thing that's kind of jumping out, right, is guys who were pushing themselves too hard were being penalized for it. You saw Michael McDowell racing, up the front, and he ends up wrecking himself, kind of going too hard. Denny Hamlin did it as well at one point in this race. Kyle Larson ends up losing the wheel. It's a tough break for him because it looked like he had potentially a race-winning or maybe close to a race-winning car. That kind of ruins his day, but guys were rewarded for trying to take care of their stuff and penalized at times for pushing too hard. And I think in some ways that's what we want to see as fans, right? And that was the case. And, I listened to what Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi had to say about this as well in kind of a similar way. And I agree. It was definitely more entertaining than your average Texas race, right? And then we get to the end of this thing where some, different guys cycle up to the front. Talked about the mistakes that were made, and that kind of took some of the guys out of the mix. And we saw 3 or 4 late cautions, usually not towards the front. They were in the middle to the back of the pack. But that kept making us have to re-rack with restarts late. And eventually Chase Elliott ends up front. And, I don't know if he had the best car. I don't know if he had the second best car. But he put himself in position. And when that restart came out, he was able to take control. Ross Chastain was racing him for the lead. And you always wonder, Ross is kind of the guy who will do anything. So there was certainly some nerves there for Chase, I'm sure. And texted a friend of mine, like, look, Chase is better be ready for anything because Ross is going to go for the win right here. But fortunately for him, he got clear. And then William Byron dumped Ross Chastain back behind the field or behind the leader on the white flag lap. I don't know, what really went into it, whether it was intentional or not. Didn't have a full judgment of it, but it was surprising to see. And that ends up securing the victory for Chase Elliott, and it ends a long race winless streak, more than a full season. We know, of course, about the broken leg last year where he didn't race for a large stretch, missed the playoffs. And this was big for him. I mean, this was big for him to get back. I talked about it preseason. I had him in my championship 4. I said I thought it was going to be a big-time bounce-back season for Elliott. And we saw signs of that. We saw good runs. Look, Hendrick's been so good, so it's been hard for Elliott not to be up in the front, at least, based on how fast his cars have been. We know that. But this time he finally seals the deal and gets it done. He was in the mix for a couple of wins here and there. Now he gets one. That's massive for him. And look, he's the most popular driver in the sport. I hinted at that at the beginning of the show. So that's good for NASCAR in some ways. And Chase, look, I'm hard on him. I think, personality-wise, you want to see more from him. Sometimes he's just not that guy. And it's kind of this weird conflicting thing where it's like he's the face of the sport. He's the most popular driver in the sport. Doesn't always feel like he wants to be that guy, but he is. And so when he wins, it gets buzz. And he did it in the Hooters car, which I thought was significant because he kind of talked about how it was paying in a nod to Alan Kulwicki, who, of course, drove the Hooters car back in the day and, was so well respected around the sport. And so he was excited to get that paint scheme in victory lane. And, a better Texas race than anticipated. I don't know if it means we fixed all of Texas's problems. I'm not ready to go there yet. But good to get back on a mile and a half for NASCAR to have a more compelling race. And good to kind of see, one of the big names in the sport come through. So Chase gets the win. Look, Alex Bowman had a disastrous day. He's fallen all the way to, I think, 15th in the point standings. He's the one Hendrick car that's not getting it going right now. And that's where I wanted to go lastly here before we start talking about next week. Hendrick and Gibbs, they've won all but one race. And the one race that was won was on a drafting track with Daniel Suarez, a crazy finish, as we know. It's been nothing but Hendrick and Gibbs since then. The parity is seemingly going away a little bit. Now, there's still guys, especially today, you saw Todd Gilliland, Michael McDowell, Brad Keselowski run up there, Chastain. You've seen some different names run up front, but not win races. And, I'm wondering, now look, Talladega's next week, so that could be a change in that, but it wouldn't really tell us much because we know anybody can win at those tracks. So I don't know. I don't know if that's I don't think it's a good thing, but you're at least seeing the real title contenders emerging, and we know, look, the 8 cars on those 2 teams, and then maybe if you want to take Bowman out of it for now since he's not kind of living up to his Hendrick teammates' runs, and maybe Ty Gibbs you think is a little bit too early to trust him and Gibbs, but the rest of those 6 drivers are going to be there, and we know that, and they've all, kind of been running up front. So let's talk about Talladega. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited to get back to a drafting track. We had 2 right off the bat, Daytona and Atlanta, weeks 1 and 2. Long break, and now we're back with one of the great tracks in this sport, one of the great, weekends, everybody getting rowdy and getting crazy over there in Talladega. So who can take advantage of this opportunity? We saw Suarez do it at Atlanta. William Byron winning at Daytona, obviously a Hendrick car. We knew he was going to have chances to win elsewhere, and he already has one elsewhere with leading the way in the series right now. But can somebody steal one? That'd be massive. And look, the way this playoff point cut line, I just talked about Bowman's down there. We know Brad Keselowski. Joey Logano's in that mix still after, he still hasn't shown us some race-winning speed very consistently. Can someone come up and steal one? Somebody like those guys like Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Harrison Burton. Can one of those guys jump up and take it? Corey LaJoie as well. Or do we have a driver who we thought was going to be a playoff guy anyway, add himself 5 playoff points, add himself a victory, lock himself in, know he doesn't have to worry about the point situation later on in the year? It'll be compelling, and I can't wait for it. It's it's kind of a shift for me into the full middle portion of the season, right? Like once you get to this Talladega race and you see who wins it, now you can start to see how things are really shaping up. We'll have a great opportunity to look at the playoff standings and know who the guys that we think are capable of making it on points are, who the guys who are going to somewhat go into must-win mode the rest of the year. And look, guys like Kyle Busch, a lot of questions to answer based on how poorly he's run in the last month or so. He's right there on the cut line. I believe he's in 16th. So I'm excited for Talladega. As I said, we'll do more on that race, and I will likely have somebody on. We'll see, maybe even a bonus episode there if it warrants it. But until then, please keep viewing it, liking and subscribing. We appreciate everything. Comment as well. Comment down below who you think is going to get the win at Talladega. I'll go, for Talladega, it's tough. I would like to take one of those guys who can jump up and steal one here, but I'm just not sure that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be a driver who's been up to the front a decent amount this year. And, for me, How about going with Alex Bowman, who has struggled, as we mentioned, in relation to his teammates of late getting results? He's had some speed there before. We know the long stretch he had qualifying at the front of Daytona for so long. I think Alex Bowman ends up in the right spot, maybe catches a break here, and it would take a lot of pressure off of him. So I'll pick Bowman. Let me know down below who you got, and should be a fun one. But that's another episode of 4 Tire Change. We'll see you next week for Talladega.